The Young and the Restless spoilers Thurdays full episodes update June 26 as the echoes of the video footage died down and the gala spiraled into disarray, tension gripped the castle like a vice. Conversations fractured into whispers and glares, alliances began to shift in the shadows, and the truth that had been buried beneath the sophistication of European grandeur had clawed its way into the open. Abby Newman's voice sliced through the confusion as she turned to the group that had just arrived, her face pale, eyes darting toward Chance. "Do you think it could be Tucker McCall?" she asked, her voice a whisper of dread and disbelief. But before anyone could respond, Jack Abbott, ever the reluctant bearer of bad news, stepped forward and delivered the crushing blow. "Brace yourselves," he said with grim precision. "Aristotle Dumas is Cain Ashby." A thick silence followed, broken only by the gasps that rippled through the cluster of latecomers. Abby blinked rapidly, unable to reconcile the suave, calculating investor they had all heard about with the man she had once known. "I don't see how that's possible," she murmured, searching the eyes of her family for some hint of a mistake, some possibility that Jack had gotten it wrong. Michael Baldwin's lawyer instincts kicked in immediately as he scanned the room, trying to triangulate Cain's last known location. "Where is he now?" he asked sharply. Nikki, composed but clearly under strain, responded with clipped efficiency, "He's in private discussion with Victor." Billy Abbott, fuming and fidgeting, could no longer contain his frustration. "We all deserve to know what the hell is going on here," he snapped. His voice carried across the hall, drawing eyes and deepening the divide between those in the know and those left in the dark. Abby, her arms crossed tightly against her chest, said what many were already thinking. "Lily must be reeling." Nikki nodded solemnly. "She is. Completely blindsided." Then, turning to Lauren and Michael with an expression hardened by experience and intuition, she asked the inevitable question, "What do you think Cain wants from the two of you, and from Chance?" Downstairs, the hallway outside the study remained still for a moment before Victor emerged, walking with deliberate gravity. Nikki intercepted him near the entrance to the dining hall. "How did it go?" she asked cautiously. Victor didn't break stride. "I'll discuss that conversation privately," he said coldly, his voice like steel as his gaze lingered on Michael. "With those I trust." Without another word, he motioned for Nikki and Nick to follow him, leaving the others behind in a cloud of speculation. When the three of them were alone, Victor closed the doors and turned to face them with a gravity that made Nick straighten and Nikki stiffen. "Cain wants to trade his empire, everything he's built under the Dumas name, for Chancellor," Victor said. "Every holding. Every shell company. Every asset that looks 10 times better than what it's worth on paper." Nick raised an eyebrow. "But his companies? I've looked into them. They're huge. International. More valuable than Chancellor by a mile." Victor didn't disagree. "That depends on the lens you use. Money isn't the only currency I value." He looked toward Nikki, who straightened her posture, her eyes gleaming with a mixture of resolve and defiance. "I run Chancellor," she said firmly. "Not him. And I'm not giving it up. Catherine wouldn't want me to. And I won't dishonor her by even considering it." Victor's expression shifted, softening for the briefest moment into pride. "That's the answer I wanted to hear," he said. "And it's the one I expected." Elsewhere, in the side lounge just off the conservatory, Lily Winters sat in a state of shock, her voice trembling as she spoke to Damien, Cain and Devon. The betrayal had ripped through her like a blade she never saw coming. "He lived a double life," she said, barely above a whisper. "He let me believe he was one man when the whole time he was someone else entirely." "How long was he Dumas? When did it start? What was the moment he chose to lie to me?" Her voice cracked. Devon sat beside her, his hand on her shoulder, but his frustration bled through his carefully constructed composure. "How can you believe anything he says now?" he asked, not unkindly but with the urgency of someone who had been burned too many times by the wrong people. "He wants to come back to Genoa City like nothing happened." After this? Damien chimed in, he didn't just deceive you. He put everything at risk. He built a false identity, manipulated global players, and tried to swap it for something he could never truly own. In the corridors between confrontation and consequence, guests began to whisper of more than just lies, they whispered of danger. Of betrayal with teeth. Of secrets that didn't just embarrass but endangered. And while Victor continued to tighten the circle around Chancellor, quietly shifting financial protections and alerting security, Chance moved with urgency. Kane had spoken of a threat, one that wasn't just business. Someone out there, perhaps even inside the chateau, wanted him dead. And while most saw Kane as the predator, Chance had begun to suspect he was also a target. Back in the main salon, Abby tried to calm herself. She had seen her family face many upheavals before. Divorces, business takeovers, scandals, but nothing quite like this. The man she once knew, the man she once believed had changed, had built an empire on deception. And now he wanted back in. But into what? Her family? Her trust? Her city? She wasn't ready to forgive, and judging by the looks around the room, neither was anyone else. And just when the air seemed to settle, the screens flickered again. Not hacked this time. Not secret. This was Kane's move. A live stream, broadcast from the room where he had met Victor. His face filled the screen, composed but no longer calculating. Just raw. I never wanted to hurt anyone, he began. I built Dumas because I needed to escape. From my failures. From the man I used to be. But I see now, I never escaped anything. I just delayed the reckoning. The feed cut off. People stood in stunned silence. Some felt anger. Others, confusion. But in that moment, one truth became undeniable. Genoa City wasn't ready to take Kane back. And maybe, just maybe, Kane wasn't ready to return. Not yet. Not ever. As the sun began to rise over the glittering coastline of Nice, casting long golden streaks across the marble floors of the chateau, the chaos of the night before lingered in the air like an aftertaste of poison no one could quite swallow. The castle, once the stage for an elegant business gala, now stood as a monument to betrayal, manipulation, and psychological warfare. And while Sharon and Phyllis nursed the rawness of their revelations in silence, the rest of the guest list had yet to discover just how deep the darkness ran. In the dining hall, the mood shifted with the late arrival of four important figures: Abby Newman, Chance Chancellor, Michael Baldwin, and Lauren Fenmore. Their delayed presence caused a stir not only for their status but also for what their arrival symbolized. The timing was impeccable, or perhaps sinister, for as they stepped through the grand entrance, the distant echoes of voices from the maze still vibrated through the ancient stone corridors. "Did we miss anything?" Lauren asked with a sardonic lift of her brow, scanning the tense expressions of those seated. Nikki, seated in her quiet command at the head of the table, raised her glass with a forced smile and replied with a sharp edge, "Oh darling, you haven't missed a thing. Except perhaps your last breath of normalcy." Victor Newman had been watching from the terrace, his eyes not on the guests but on the chessboard forming beneath their feet. The night's revelations had changed everything. He had long suspected that Kane Ashby, rebranded now as Aristotle Dumas, was playing a more dangerous game than he let on. But even Victor was beginning to realize just how deep those roots had grown. When Kane approached him for a private meeting later that morning, Victor was already 3 steps ahead. They met in the drawing room, a room chosen deliberately for its symbolism, a place of diplomacy, but also of judgment. Victor didn't sit. He stood, arms crossed, a statue of controlled power. Kane, ever confident but now slightly frayed around the edges, opened the conversation with what he assumed was a compelling pitch. "I know you don't trust me," Kane began, "but you haven't heard everything I'm offering." Victor cut him off with a curt nod. "Then put your cards on the table." Kane did just that. With a smooth motion, he outlined his proposal. A full transfer of assets from his Dumas holdings, international capital, strategic partners from Monaco to Dubai, and exclusive licensing rights for biotech patents that had yet to hit the market. In return? Chancellor Winters. Not in part. In full. I'm ready, Kane said, his voice a mix of fatigue and hope. I want to close the book on Dumas and come home. Back to Genoa City. Back to normal. Victor chuckled, low and dangerous. Normal? After the lies you've spun? After the mask you wore? Who do you think will believe you? Kane remained silent. Victor stepped closer. Take your fortune and leave. As far from Genoa City as your private jet can fly you. Chancellor isn't for sale. Not now. Not ever. Kane's lips parted, about to respond, but Victor raised a finger. You want to chase a company? Chase Jabot. If you do that, you'll have my support. Maybe even a fraction of my respect. The words stung. Not because they were unexpected, but because they were final. Outside in the garden, Nikki was holding court, her voice sharp as crystal, reaffirming to any who would listen that she, and only she, held the reins of Chancellor. Diane Jenkins, who had wandered into the periphery of the maze area, raised an eyebrow as the wind carried faint voices from within. Who shows up to a party this late, she quipped. Moments later, Lauren and Michael appeared, followed by Chance and Abby. Did we miss anything? Lauren asked again. Nikki stood and approached, her tone cool. Oh, you've missed plenty. But we saved the best horrors for morning. The unease rippled again. Because while the castle seemed calm, the night had altered the atmosphere. The surveillance system, the psychological trauma, the whispered threats, all of it still lingered just beneath the surface. And then, privately, Kane approached Chance. There was no more pretense. No business jargon or vague metaphors. Just one sentence, whispered with quiet urgency, someone's trying to kill me. Chance blinked. Who? Kane didn't answer. He only added, it's someone here. The implication sent shivers through Chance's already heightened instincts. As a former cop and federal agent, he knew the look in a man's eyes when he was genuinely afraid. And for the first time since arriving, Kane didn't look like a con man playing a long game. He looked like prey. But that begged the question, who would want to kill Kane Ashby? The list wasn't short. He had burned bridges with the Newmans, the Abbotts, and now even the Baldwins. He had manipulated Phyllis, traumatized Sharon, embarrassed Victor, and possibly stolen proprietary intelligence from Chancellor. But Chance suspected something deeper. Something more personal. Because this wasn't a business hit. This was revenge. Meanwhile, in a quiet corner of the castle, Nick Newman confronted his father. What do you know? He demanded. Victor gave his son a long, calculating look. I know Kane is desperate. I know he's not leaving without a fight. And I know he's not the only liar in this castle. Nick stepped back, shaken. What are you saying? Victor didn't answer directly. Instead, he muttered, protect your sister. Watch your back. And whatever you do, don't let history repeat itself. The warning wasn't about business. It was about blood. About survival. And suddenly, Nick understood. This wasn't just a corporate war. This was a vendetta wrapped in legacy and cloaked in champagne. That evening, as the guests assembled for what was meant to be the closing toast, the lights flickered again. A projector screen descended from the ceiling, unauthorized. And grainy footage played, Sharon and Phyllis discovering the cameras. The surveillance room. A shot of Kane watching them. Gasps rippled through the hall. Kane stepped forward, jaw clenched. This is a fabrication, but no one listened. Nikki stood. You came here to destabilize us. But all you've done is expose your rot. And from the shadows, someone else spoke. He's not working alone. The voice belonged to an old contact of Victor's, someone who had once worked in the security detail of Chancellor Industries. A man who knew Martin Laurent. Who knew the systems. Who had been tracking the resurgence of those patterns across Europe. Martin's reach didn't end when he disappeared. He had a successor. Someone who inherited his methods. His scripts. His maps. All eyes turned to Kane. But Kane was silent. Frozen. Because in that moment, even he wasn't sure anymore whether he had designed this horror or simply been caught in someone else's web. And as the castle doors opened and police entered at Victor's silent command, there was only one truth left: the past had returned. And no one, not even the master manipulators, could outrun it. The sun had long since dipped beneath the horizon, and the warm Mediterranean air had turned cool with a hush of unease that mirrored the mood inside the ancient stone corridors of the chateau. After a long day of revelations, fractured trust, and revelations that tore the very fabric of family and identity, the night still had more to unravel. Lily Winters sat on the edge of a velvet chaise in the drawing room, her thoughts tangled in contradictions, her emotions flaring and faltering like candlelight in a draught. Damien Kane sat nearby, his posture alert but tender, eyes watching her with patient concern. Devon stood at the bar across the room, arms crossed, jaw set in quiet judgment. For them, the return of Kane Ashby wasn't just a disruption. It was a seismic tremor, one that cracked open old wounds and brought long-dormant suspicions roaring back to life. Devon's voice broke the silence. "You don't think part of him came here to make peace with you?" His words weren't soft, they were measured, weighted with the kind of truth that made denial impossible. "If you stay, Lily, he'll see it as a sign. It'll encourage him." Lily nodded slowly, not in agreement but acknowledgement. "I know," she said, barely above a whisper. "That's why I need the night to think." She stood and paced the edge of the carpet, each step echoing her uncertainty. Damien rose and approached, his hand brushing her elbow gently. "Whatever you need," he said quietly, "I'm here for you. No expectations. No pressure. Just here." His presence steadied her, if only slightly. But just as Lily exhaled, the door creaked. The shift in atmosphere was immediate. Kane stood in the threshold. Not with swagger, not with the air of a man who had fooled the world, but with the hesitation of someone who knew he was no longer welcome. His eyes flicked between Devon and Damien, then rested on Lily. "Devon," he said with a forced smile, "it's good to see you." Devon didn't return the sentiment. He simply stared, unflinching, his silence more powerful than any insult. Kane turned to Damien and extended his hand. "And you must be Damien Kane. I've heard a lot about you. It's good to finally meet you." Damien looked at the hand, then back at Kane's face, and made no move to accept it. The gesture hung in the air, a symbol of a past no one wanted to reconcile with. After a long, awkward pause, Kane withdrew his hand and turned toward Lily. "Could we talk?" "Alone?" he asked. Lily looked between Damien and Devon, then nodded once. They stepped out, closing the door softly behind them. In the garden courtyard, lit by flickering torches and moonlight, the tension was thick. Kane tried to smile, but it faltered as he looked at the woman he once loved, the woman whose heart he had broken in more ways than he could count. "It's good to see you again," he said. "That feeling's not mutual," Lily replied flatly. "You've hurt a lot of people, Kane. Me included." He nodded, swallowing the retort that rose to his lips. "I know. And I deserve that." She crossed her arms. "Devon and Damien are leaving tomorrow. They're done with this whole charade. Maybe I should be too." Kane stepped forward, eyes pleading. "Lily, I came here because I have so much to say to you. So much you need to know. About what I've done. About what I'm planning. She scoffed. Oh, so now's the time to unveil your mysterious motives? The grand reveal? Kane's voice dropped. When I'm ready, I'll tell you everything. The full picture. How it all connects. And how it all comes back to you. She stared at him, searching his expression for sincerity, for proof that he wasn't just spinning another elaborate tale. Is that your plan? She asked. To win me back with confessions and justifications? To erase everything with a speech? Kane stepped closer, voice trembling. I never stopped loving you, Lily. I don't want to give up on us. I can't. Her breath caught, not from surprise but from the weight of hearing those words again after so many years of silence. You don't get to say that, she said. You lost that right the moment you decided to live a lie. The moment you became someone I couldn't recognize. Someone who vanished without a goodbye and came back wearing someone else's name. Kane looked down, ashamed. I became Dumas because I didn't know how to be Kane anymore. Not without you. Not after everything I destroyed. She turned away, needing space, needing air. You're not the only one who lost something, Kane. I had to rebuild from the rubble you left behind. And just when I found balance, just when I could breathe again, you show up with more fire. Silence hung between them. Raw. Heavy. But not yet final. Inside the lounge, Devon sat with arms crossed, watching the shadows shift beyond the window. Damien, pacing slowly, finally broke the silence. He's a ghost with skin, he muttered. That man's not here for closure. He's here for control. Devon nodded. And Lily needs to see that before he pulls her under again. Moments later, Lily returned. Alone. Her face was unreadable. Devon stood. Are you okay? She nodded but didn't elaborate. I just need time. That's all. Damien stepped forward. He's not going to stop. Lily looked at both men, her voice quiet but resolute. I don't think this is about me anymore. I think I'm just the last thread tying him to a life that no longer exists. He's not just trying to win me back. He's trying to rewrite the past. Devon's voice darkened. Then we better make sure he doesn't get to. Because Kane may have confessed a sliver of his truth, but it was only a sliver. The full picture, whatever it entailed, remained buried beneath layers of charm, trauma, and strategic omissions. And as the storm clouds gathered over the chateau once more, one thing became clear to all of them. No matter what Kane claimed, he wasn't done. And neither was the damage he could do.